Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Sports Speak. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
It was actually a busy weekend in sports. Baseball was back. Of course, some tough news today with the Miami Marlins, with several of their players testing positive. Before we get to the game action, of course, we got to talk about that because the Marlins, now 9 of their players have tested positive. Also, a couple of them, including catcher Jorge Alfaro, Cooper, their right fielder. I mean, 2 guys that tested positive before Sunday's game, yet they still played, which is a lot of criticism now is being directed towards Derek Jeter, who is the Marlins CEO, and also Rob Manfred, because the game still took place even with that going on. Now there's more cases, so they canceled the Marlins-Orioles game for tonight. The Orioles were sent back to Baltimore, which means tomorrow's game won't be played. They're scheduled to play at Camden Yards on Wednesday. We'll see if the Marlins piece together a team for that. And then the Phillies, who played the Marlins, Citizens Bank Park, the Marlins were in that clubhouse, so obviously that needs to be sanitized. So the Phillies-Yankees game tonight, which is supposed to be Joe Girardi's triumphant return against the Yankees, will not be happening, and we'll see how this progresses or if the games end up being shifted to Yankee Stadium. But, Tim, I mean, this is the concern everybody had. And this is why from the beginning I said the bubble is the only way it's going to work. The NBA and the NHL going well right now. Basketball's only had a couple positive cases. The NHL had 0 out of 4,000 tests the last couple of days. So I think the MLB really struggled, and they should have done it another way.
No, I agree. The MLB definitely struggled and should have, taken this a total different way, Eddie. But, I just don't understand, first off, what the Miami Marlins were thinking. To my understanding, based upon what I was reading an article earlier today, and as also believe Jeremy shared it with us in a group chat, or maybe it was Aiden, that they had a team meeting before the game, knowing that players had COVID, but yet they opted to play yesterday. And now you have 9+ guys, and I know we don't know who the 9+ guys are, but they also insinuate that 2 other coaches as well have caught COVID. And to me, that is worrisome because Miami is the hot zone, needless to say, for COVID-19. And the fact that they even risked going out there and playing is absolutely outrageous because now you affect the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, players that had nothing to do with COVID, was following protocol, didn't have a single player with an issue, all of a sudden now their games get canceled. Their series is also likely canceled, and they have to go through testing policies now. So it's the actions of, I don't want to say one individual, but one group in particular that ultimately affects the others. And I'm glad that the Phillies and the Yankees aren't playing today, more than I'd like to see Joe Girardi facing against the Yankees. Obviously not in a preseason affair, but, obviously too, you look at it, could that series be shifted? Yes. But the main issue too, Eddie, and I do want to bring this up, is that, well, the problem is now, let's say the players get tested today. The odds are they don't get the results until the final game of the series. So what's the point of playing it now anyways? Mm-hmm. See, and this became the issue where the reason why the bubble worked, and don't get me wrong, I criticized the NBA incredibly hard for their system, but I criticized them because they wanted to finish the regular season and not just do the playoffs, not the bubble itself. The bubble is a great idea to keep people inside. I just didn't think people were going to do that. And I think that was already proven because some players, for example, went to strip clubs and ultimately but hold on, they were forced to, get suspended as a result of breaking the policy. Mm-hmm. But MLB has to do the same thing. This isn't going to work traveling in and out. Canada made it very clear not wanting Toronto there having these issues. Imagine if they went to Canada. Imagine if this happened in Toronto. This would have been a major, major issue. So I view it as baseball needs a second plan. Baseball needs to revitalize, and they need to put players in a bubble. Keep them in 3 designated locations, let's say, just like how hockey is doing it essentially. You have to put these teams in bases and make sure that they're in one spot because, unfortunately, Major League Baseball is not going to continue unless things are made. And baseball did not prepare for COVID properly. This was a rush job and a very, very bad deal. And again, this lays on Rob Manfred and the issues he has as baseball commissioner.
Totally. And we talked about this a few weeks ago. My main concern was how is this feasibly going to work with travel? I mean, you live in New York, I live in New Jersey. Our two states, I mean, we're two of the states that are restricting travel from other states and encouraging 14-day quarantines. Actually, in New Jersey, there's only 13 states left that are not on the list where you're encouraged to go into a 14-day quarantine. And I believe New York's list is a tiny bit smaller, but still, most of the states are on that list. So first of all, I want to just clear up a couple things. And it starts with that. There are people with the Phillies-Yankees series saying, oh, they can just go to Yankee Stadium. Well, there's two problems here. First of all, would Governor Cuomo, who is, has been very restrictive when it comes to coronavirus, does he want people who were just exposed to coronavirus coming to New York? And second of all, we don't know how many Phillies might have gotten it during these 3 days. They were right next to these guys. They were on the base paths. And we saw yesterday guys like Bryce Harper and Rhys Hoskins on the base paths wearing a mask, something they did not do in the first two games. Only Didi was doing that for the Phillies the first couple games because of his kidney condition. Then all the Phillies were doing it when the first couple positive tests came out for the Marlins, and I don't understand why they still played the game. Second thing is Derek Jeter's statement today coming from the Marlins ownership. I mean, I personally, even as a Mets fan, I do like Derek Jeter in some ways, but I do not like the way he handled this today because he was saying that this wasn't an issue until they went on the road. Pump the brakes for a second, Derek. You're coming from the state with the highest COVID cases right now. You're coming from the region of that state that has the highest cases. Miami-Dade County is probably the hot spot of all of coronavirus right now in America. And it's not like this just randomly came about when they went to Philadelphia, because no Phillies yet have tested positive. Maybe some will now, and they probably got it from Marlins players. It's not like they just showed up in Philadelphia and got the coronavirus. They were in Miami. They were in a hot zone. And also the spread of transmission, that's the third and final thing I want to get to here. This affects so many teams when you think about it, because everything is about the origin of transmission, who have you been around, because 4 Marlins players that have tested already, including Garrett Cooper and Jorge Alfaro, they are asymptomatic. There is nothing showing that they have COVID, which is, once again, why this disease is so dangerous. But think about all the teams that are now affected. You've got, of course, the Marlins losing their players. You've got the Orioles. They've got to reschedule games. Then you've got the Phillies now who are exposed to it. Citizens Bank Park has to be cleaned up intensively and see if maybe they can even use different places for dressing instead of just those clubhouses that the Marlins were just in. Yankees were supposed to play them. And what about the Braves, who played 3 games against the Marlins last week? Who knows how many of the Marlins still had it then on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday when they played those 3 summer camp games. And then the Mets just played the Braves. So suddenly, that's a fifth of the league that has been affected by this Marlins situation. And this is why I was saying from the beginning, you need a bubble. The perfect situation, I thought, of course, the problem would have been how many players would actually want to stay in the bubble. But my thought, for logistically and for safety, go to Omaha. You've got that whole compound where you have the College World Series. I know the fields are a little small, but you can adjust. You could play there. You had 4 different fields you could use when you're in Omaha. You'd have 3 games a day on the fields, 12 games in total. And I thought about it mathematically. You could get the 60-game season done in 75 days if you did that, and you had 3 games a day on the fields. I think that would have been the best option. And safety-wise, I just don't see how this can feasibly continue. And now the MLB, not only do they have the safety concerns, and now you have got all these guys testing positive, but how are you going to fit this in? Once again, 60 games in 66 days. How is this scheduling even actually going to work moving forwards with all these games that are going to have to get made up with Miami, Baltimore, the Yankees, and the Phillies?
Well, and then my other question is okay, well, we see what happened with the Marlins, but look at other franchises around. I'm sure some other team is going to have a similar scenario. Now, not as I don't want to say the term idiotic, but I guess I have to. Not as idiotic as what the Miami Marlins did. But overall, it's just simply the fact that this is just the beginning and we're 3 days into the regular season. I mean, I just don't know what to expect right now for baseball. This is not something that, of course, you want to see with the precautions being taken. But overall, and you mentioned a point a couple moments ago, Eddie, about, all right, well, bring the Phillies to New York. If these players have been exposed to COVID, and I'm sure they were cued off before the game, that there was a COVID situation with, for example, Jose Urania, Garrett Cooper, and such,
Exactly.
but they weren't aware. Well, I'm saying that's the reason why they were too off to wear a mask, but they weren't aware of the fact that more players may have caught it. And this is where I blame Major League Baseball, not just the Miami Marlins. Because, I mean, you have to find something. If you're going to have these guys travel every day and you're going to test them every other day or once they get into the ballpark, once every series, this isn't going to work out if tests come back in 2 days. If someone has COVID, they need to find out immediately. And I'm not saying just on the day. Sure, if it takes 24 hours, then so be it. But there needs to be something done. And the problem is that Major League Baseball doesn't have the capabilities of getting it done no matter how many resources they have, which is why you mentioned the bubble, and specifically Omaha, which I agree with, is where they should be. I'm eager to see if in the next upcoming week, if there's suddenly immediate changes and there's a distinct location put into place. Because at this point, if you want baseball, it has to be in one spot. It can't be in 30 different ballparks.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And then the other problem that I do want to say here, too, that I noticed with the Marlins is not just them. There's been other teams, too. Don Mattingly is sitting there wearing his mask as a chin strap. He does not have his nose under the mask. I mean, come on. As a coach, you've got to be setting the right example. And, I mean, you're exposed to everybody, too. And someone like Don Mattingly, I mean, he's pushing 60. You don't want to be in that situation. And I was just comparing watching baseball and watching basketball. And in the NBA, I know they've had this situation with Lou Williams going to the gentleman's club and everything, but, I mean, for the most part, and you're seeing the coaches, they've got the masks on properly. The social distancing is taking place when they're doing these scrimmage games. They've got the plexiglass around the broadcasters. I mean, overall, I really like the way the NBA is handling it, and I just think the bubble was the best possible option here. And, I mean, we're 3 games into the season. It's not like we're like 2 months in and so this suddenly happened. There's time to adjust. You're 3 days in. You could make a change at this point, but this is really going to, once again, test how good of a commissioner Rob Manfred truly is, because he's in a tough spot right now, and he's going to handle this properly. And also, one last thing, this has got to be flashing lights right now to the NFL, that they have to do a bubble. They cannot do the same thing as the MLB, because especially in a high-contact sport, this issue would just be so much worse for them.
Oh, no, indeed. Baseball has to, be, I guess, the catalyst, because they were the people that tried not to show what's right and wrong. And unfortunately, baseball right now is wrong. And I am also eager to see one other thing in the terms of how it's going to work, because you have to pass 5 examinations proving that you no longer have COVID. So these guys are going to be out for longer than 14 days. It's going to probably be about 3 weeks. Which means how many minor leaguers are you going to bring up to play games? Because I'm going to tell you right now what Rob Manfred's going to do. And he's going to say, well, we're going to play with or without you. Either we forfeit all your games or we turn around and we have you come and play. And I have a feeling the Marlins, they're going to bring, 12-plus minor leaguers up. And they're going to be the worst team in baseball, but it's simply because, hey, your players catch COVID. Rob Manfred's just going to throw you into a ditch and say, all right, well, you caught COVID, so be it, live with it.
Yeah, and wrapping up on this, I want to take a quote that Mark DeRosa said on MLB Central today. I'm very critical of D-Row a lot, but I did agree with him on one point. He said that this is really setting the precedent that now it's going to come down to whatever team, like the last man standing. That's who wins the World Series. It's just going to be like a question of fate. Who doesn't get COVID? Who does? I mean, we're going to see superstars going down. Mike Moustakas was so good for the Reds on opening day. Now there's questions if he has COVID. He was not feeling great, so now he's going to be in question. I mean, it's just going to continue to spiral. And the only way they can make this better, they're not going to truly alleviate it. We've got a pandemic going on. But the only way they're going to be able to play baseball and have limited COVID cases is if they go to a bubble or at least go to like 3 overall locations for the groups of 10 teams that are playing each other.
I mean, Eddie, think about this. We did a fantasy draft 5 days ago, both you and I. Already half of my roster has either gotten injured or has caught COVID. So just think about that. Think about that. And this is 5 days. 5 days. I don't want to think about for the rest of the year. That's what really scares me the most. Because as you mentioned, last man standing, That is probably exactly what's going to happen. It's whatever team, because remember, you sit for this long, there's going to be a massive amount of injuries. For example, Justin Verlander. It's just going to happen. But then COVID is going to ramp up. It's going to get worse and worse. And whichever team has the least amount of stars, I guess you could say, that catch it is probably going to be successful.
And this is why this was just handled so poorly by baseball, because you had time that you could have had. I want to forget about COVID for a second and focus in on the injuries. You had time that you could have pieced together something with the Players Association or mandated a season so you would have had more time for training. We have seen two older elite pitchers in Justin Verlander and Corey Kluber already hurt after their first starts of the season. Corey Kluber was just announced he has a muscle tear, so he's going to be out a month. And Justin Verlander now with this injury, we're getting reported he's out for the season. He and Kate Upton say he's not, but he's out nonetheless. So, we've seen a lot of injuries to pitchers. Think about Marcus Stroman, too, with the Mets. And it's just going to continue to spiral like this. But this is why there are so many issues here with baseball between them and also the Players Association, too. They just couldn't agree, which is one thing. But Rob Manfred should have mandated a season a while back and allowed for more time to get training in, get a little more reps in for the pitchers. And if that was not going to happen, then just pack it up and wait till 2021. It's as easy as that. It's a tough time right now, but I think the bubble would have been the best option. But we did have baseball over the weekend, and I am going to turn it over to the actual on-field play because we did see some great games over the last 3 days. It's been interesting. No team is unbeaten. No sweeps this weekend. Every team dropped at least one game. Everybody's either 2-1 or 1-2. Actually, as we're recording this right now, Angels and A's and Padres D-backs are going on. So A's and Padres are going for their third wins. But regardless, it was a fun weekend. I think the crowd noise, it was a little weird during the summer camp games, but the teams kind of adjusted the levels and stuff, and it sounded much more realistic at all of these ballparks. So kudos to them. Obviously, some tough injuries we've already seen for guys like Corey Kluber and Justin Verlander. The extra inning rule, extra innings are flying by now. All these games wrapping up in 10 innings. But, I personally am not a fan of the rule whatsoever. But you know what? For this season, I like it because you want to get these games done as quickly as possible, and you really don't want these guys together on a field for 5-6 hours. If you can get it done in 3 hours, that's great. And I think the universal DH is paying off so far. We've seen someone like Yoenis Cespedes, who has been hurt for 2 years after his wild boar incident and all that stuff, coming back, hitting a home run, and helping the Mets win opening day. Overall, I think some of the rule changes they wanted are paying off. We've talked about how COVID is not. But on the field, the play is good. Even without fans, it's still an exciting game to watch. And I want to ask you first, just overall this weekend, what team has been the biggest positive surprise in the first few days, and which one negatively?
The team to me that's been the most positive surprise, in my opinion, has been the Chicago Cubs. You open up the year, you have Kyle Hendricks. He turns around and he throws a shutout to open up the season. And then you had Chatwood come in yesterday. Didn't really have expectations. He was like a reliever, mixed starter in that 3-hole. And he as well puts together a pretty good win. And now the Cubs sit at 2-1. Big surprise. Obviously, we knew the Cubs were good, but their pitching to open up the year has been good. And I know they did terrible with Yu Darvish on the mound second game, but they're still right there digging and looking very well. My biggest upset, though, I would say, in this really start was, it's a little bit tough. I would like to say the Boston Red Sox because their pitching, I know the Boston Red Sox didn't really have much expectations this year, but to go from opening day, a great start for Nady Eovaldi, for then your two very solid pitchers, for example, of Perez to get slapped around, and same thing as well, by the way, for the Mets with Rick Porcello, that, the way you look at it is that's been a little bit of a disappointment because you have teams that have the capabilities you would think of winning, and they just haven't done it. But I also think it's really too early to say in terms of disappointment what teams have disappointed you and such. I really think you have to wait till after the first 2 weeks to really crown a disappointment. But, I mean, how about the start for Baltimore as well? I would not have expected the Baltimore Orioles to, go out there and give Boston a really big run for their money.
Yeah, Baltimore, Detroit, and the Marlins are all above 500 on July 27th. You would have never thought that in 2020, but in this year, anything can happen. The biggest surprise, I just mentioned them, I'd say positively, it's the Detroit Tigers. I mean, they took 2 of 3 from Cincinnati, a really good ball club with a good rotation with Trevor Bauer, Luis Castillo manning the way out there, and they've got Castellanos, Moustakas, Votto, Aquino, but Miggy Cabrera's still out there, and he's still producing. Had a good game on Saturday, and just Detroit, I mean, they got a lot of young guys that can play a lot of different positions as well. Guys like Nico Goodrum, Jacoby Jones, Dawel Lugo. I mean, they've got these guys you've never really heard about, but they're starting to come together. And yes, they're in a very tough division with Cleveland, Minnesota, and the White Sox, but they might be able to beat out Kansas City and get out of the cellar, which they've been trapped in these last couple of years because Kansas City did not look good against Cleveland. The disappointments, I'd say there are 3 for me. The Reds, who I just mentioned, just got beaten 2 out of 3 by the Tigers. The Phillies, who just lost to COVID-laden Marlins in 2 out of 3 games. I mean, I expected a little more from them. Their pitching staff has been brutal to start the season, to say the least, giving up 10 runs yesterday to the Marlins. They gave up 9, I think, on Saturday. I mean, and just they haven't gotten the production from their starting staff. And then you mentioned the Mets because, I mean, personally, I'm not that surprised. They always win opening day. They win opening day every year. It really doesn't matter. Jacob deGrom, I mean, he was elite. Just watch. He's going to go 2-2 with like an ERA of like 1, and he's going to win his 3rd straight Cy Young because that's how it works here. But, I mean, Pete Alonso has looked lost at the plate in these first 3 games. I think he has become too aggressive with just swinging for the fences, and that's all he's doing.
You know who's also looked lost? Jeff McNeil.
Yeah, Jeff McNeil had a slow start. He also had a couple of bad defensive plays on Saturday, and he also had a base running error on Saturday. After he got a double, he got thrown out going to 3rd on a ground ball that he should not have been running on. I'm not as concerned about McNeil because this did happen after the All-Star break last year, and he got into the groove and was able to still sustain hitting about 300, a little over for the rest of the season. And he did also get off to a slow start last season, the first few games. So I'm not overly concerned with McNeil. Alonso, though, I mean, and also he has not hit a home run in anything yet since his 53rd home run back in September. He had none in spring training, none in the 3 summer camp games, and none yet in the regular season. And he didn't hit any in any of the inter-squad games either. So I'm a little concerned about Pete Alonso. Pitching staff, we know it's going to be a mess. Edwin Diaz, I know he got the save Friday, but he was inches away from blowing that on a home run by Freddie Freeman. And then seriously, 2 strikes, 2 outs in the 9th inning, and you give up that home run to Marcell Ozuna. Like, oh my goodness. And why is he still closing games for the Mets? You've got Dellin Betances, you've got Seth Lugo, and you've got Familia, and it's still Diaz who's closing the games. I don't understand this. You have 3 other capable closers, and they're still going with him. And then no Stroman now, so now this rotation is a mess behind Jacob deGrom. Rick Porcello looked just like he did in Boston last year and was just awful last night. There's no way to put it. Then they bring in Corey Oswalt, who was supposed to be the 5th starter, and then he implodes and serves up 3rd deck home runs to Austin Riley, a 2nd decker to Ozuna. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with this pitching rotation. They have no idea who's going to start tomorrow. Tonight is Michael Wacha. I'm excited to see him. deGrom and Matz both looked excellent. That's a good thing. But the offense has to hit for them. I think McNeil's going to rebound. Conforto's had a nice start. Cespedes has been decent. Nimmo's had a nice start, as has Ahmed Rosario. But McNeil has struggled, and then Alonso and Robinson Cano have just been awful. So they got to figure things out. Fortunately, they are against that Boston team that, as you mentioned, their pitching staff is just as much of a mess as the Mets. Playing at Fenway Park in that little beanbox, I mean, that is going to be some high-scoring baseball games these next couple days. And might be the only games happening on the East Coast with everything else going on. But you know what? I mean, I wouldn't be concerned. There's still 57 games to go for all 3 of those squads. Still a long way to go and how it sorts out. But we're going to see surprises this year nonetheless. And one thing I do want to just mention, Tim is a god when it comes to predictions. because he came on the show on Thursday with me and Zoe, and he said the Yankees were going to beat the Nationals on Thursday. They were going to get a first-inning home run from either Judge or Stanton, and there was going to be 7 combined hits in the game. What do you think happened? First-inning homer from Stanton, 7 combined hits, Yankee dub. Tim, I don't even know how you did it, but you were correct right there. So kudos to you. You weren't correct, though, with your Giants prediction, but they did split.
I'm very incorrect on my MVP prediction right now. Let me tell you something. Edwin Encarnacion's batting a .080 to open up the year.
He does have a home run, though. He does have the 1 home run. That's like his only hit. But
how about Joey Votto? Your pick's looking very good all of a sudden. Votto, 2 home runs to open up the year, and he's on fire. Not as much as Nelson Cruz and Mike Moustakas, don't get me wrong, but, I mean, it's a pretty good start for Votto.
Yeah, how about Nelson Cruz? 40 years old and still producing like that with the Twins. I mean, he's gone through a lot. He used to be an outfielder, the PED suspension, moving to DH. And, I mean, at 40 years old, and it's a surprise, too, because, I mean, he was on steroids in the past, back when he was with Texas. And it's been proven, and he was part of that big PED thing led by A-Rod and Ryan Braun when they got suspended in, like, 2012 or 2013. But you know what? Usually with steroids, your body breaks down and you're not as good of a hitter. And you saw that with guys like Ryan Braun or Francisco Cervelli. And you haven't really seen that with Nelson Cruz. He's 40 years old and he's still out there hitting bombs. 2 homers and 2 doubles yesterday against the White Sox. He's doing really well. And, I mean, he's just really impressing. And he's the second oldest active player right now in baseball, only behind Albert Pujols. And he's putting on a show out there in Minnesota.
Well, right now he's on pace for a 300 RBI season, so go get it. Needless to say, for Nelson Cruz. But, I mean, let's be honest, it's going to slow down eventually. But, when I was picking my MVP on our last show, I was stuck actually in a debate with myself internally between a Nelson Cruz and an Edwin Encarnacion, simply because this is what they've done their entire careers, Eddie. They're very quick starters. I know Encarnacion this year is definitely not that case. But for Nelson Cruz, that case didn't disappear. I mean, he is raking left and right. And I'm telling you right now, Eddie, do not be surprised if going in the middle of next week, he has the 5 home run count already. And he's, maybe he's not going to get 10 RBIs by the end of this week. That I'm guaranteeing. But you'll look at it, he may have 15, 16, maybe even 17 RBIs, and he's going to start finding it, effectively, especially when he sees left-handed pitching. There's no one like him with the exception of Pete Alonso and maybe Giancarlo Stanton that can hit balls a very long way. I mean, Cruz is so effective. And, I mean, he is really going to be the one to watch. And it really stinks as well for, like I mentioned before, Mike Moustakas for the season that he's had to open up, potentially having COVID, because that now becomes a season of waste. But overall, I mean, how about the stars that struggled? Mookie Betts didn't look too well to open up the year either. He's still batting below the Mendoza line, even though it's 3 games, don't get me wrong, didn't look too promising. Another one as well, when you look at it, Christian Yelich didn't really look good at all this weekend. So I'm eager to see the guys that do have slow starts. How do they pick it up here over the next coming week and start coming to life?
And one last thing on the baseball end, I want to talk about Shohei Ohtani because he made his first start back on the mound, and it was not pretty against Oakland yesterday. He did not record a single out, 6 batters, 3 walks, 3 hits, and it was responsible for 5 total runs and a 6-4 loss. They brought in Dylan Bundy afterwards, who was extraordinary. But, I mean, I feel like after this Tommy John, it's sad to say, I feel like he's not going to be the two-way player he once was. I know it's just one start, but his velocity was down 7 miles an hour. He had that biting fast slider. He had that 98-mile-an-hour fastball when he first came here from Japan, and it's not there anymore. So hopefully he can recover, but I really think down the line he's just going to become a one-way player, and that's a batter, and he's a heck of a batter. And thinking about, in the future, in 1-2 years when Albert Pujols retires, he could really take over as the DH for years to come. And you wonder if maybe they could even stick a first baseman's glove on him and see if he could try to play there. But you know what? He's quite the hitter, and it was just one start. But overall, once again, I talked about this on the show on Thursday. The problem with the Angels is their pitching staff. Hansel Robles blowing that game on Friday. They've got Griffin Canning pitching today, who's one of their young prospects. But It's not a deep enough pitching staff. They have quite the starting lineup. They have probably one of the top 5 offenses in baseball when you think about it. And, of course, they have Mike Trout. But I don't know how this is going to continue with the Angels going forwards with that pitching staff. They still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of work to do, and I actually just finished calling a ball game as well with Dylan Bundy, who's been the long reliever, has done a very good job. But you know what? The thing, too, for Ohtani is that he's going to face a situation right now after Tommy John where he really has to reinvent himself. I really also feel, Eddie, him playing through the injury was probably the worst thing that Ohtani could have done because he really needed time to help himself. I mean, think about other players that have done it in the past. How about Carl Crawford? Remember when he did it and his career was never the same?
Yep.
Not only could he not throw effectively, I mean, don't get me wrong. It wasn't on his throwing arm. I do want to mention that. It was on his left. But it affected him because he couldn't reach for balls. His throwing motion had to change. And then on top of it, batting-wise, it had a huge impact on him. And we don't really talk about that in terms because not many fielders get Tommy John. For example, Didi Gregorius, another one who had to get Tommy John. Your swing path really changes as well because of this injury. So he has to readapt as a baseball player overall. And it's going to start on the mound. But he's going to, get better, I think, as the season goes on, but obviously not promising for a start. But, again, it's Ohtani. He'll find himself. He could have been having a bad day. You never know. But if he can, re-find what is so good about him, he's going to be magical. Otherwise, as you mentioned, then he's just going to be a career DH. And if I'm not mistaken, Ohtani does have the capability of playing second. But why would you play him at second? So that's the other thing as well. So I think, for Ohtani, that time potentially could be coming to an end. But overall, the Angels, I don't really know what to think this year. I don't know what to think. I would like to see their borderline playoff team. The system now really benefits them. And now you have to take advantage. The Houston Astros are down their best pitcher, and now they have to really put pressure on McCullers to be an effective pitcher. And, I mean, who do they have left? Zach Greinke? You're going to tell me Zach Greinke's going to come out and throw as many starts? I don't think this is looking obviously well for Houston, but it's very important that they take advantage, and they didn't do that in the first 3 days.
I'm telling you, this 16-team playoff, the teams that's going to benefit the most are the Angels, that group of 3 in the AL Central that are so good because now they could all get in. It's not just going to be 2 of them. Well, I mean, they could all get in with the wild card, my bad. But with the Yankees and Rays in the AL East, that would have been very difficult, especially with them playing the NL Central. And then, of course, the NL East, the teams outside of the Braves. This could benefit the Mets, the Phillies, and Washington to all sneak into the playoffs. But that's going to wrap up the baseball talk. Let's get into some burning debate topics because there's some things that I just want to get into over these past few days that have gone down all around the world of sports. We're going through, I think, 3 or 4 things. I'm going to start out with NASCAR because we had a race on Thursday night, a cup race at Kansas, which most people didn't even realize was happening. And it actually supposedly got the lowest ratings of any cup race since before the new millennia. Back in 1998 was the last time a cup race had that low of ratings. I mean, and it was a Thursday night. It wasn't really promoted. It was on NBCSN, opening night of the baseball season. And you had LeBron playing in a scrimmage against Luka. So a lot of sports fans were drawn to those 2 events. But I want to talk about Kansas Speedway because we had 2 ridiculously hard crashes in that cup race. First one with Matt DiBenedetto. I thought that was going to be the worst in the night. And then Ryan Preece head on into the inside wall. Thank goodness he was okay. But, I mean, the list keeps getting bigger and bigger of these hard crashes, specifically in the cup races over the last 6 or 7 years at Kansas Speedway. And I feel like, I don't know, I mean, I'm no genius when it comes to a track. But you don't see this at the other mile and a half. And I wonder if there's a change either in the track or in the package that should be thought out going forwards at Kansas Speedway.
Well, the first change that Kansas really needs to make is that it needs to make the track, multi-groove capable. Now, when you look at it, it is known to be a high lane really only track. Now, don't get me wrong. Early in the run, like you saw with Alex Bowman towards the end of the race on, I believe it was Saturday or Sunday, whenever it was, you're capable of holding that low line and being effective. But the issue is that, the track itself is a little bit an issue. And I don't know why I said Saturday, rather Thursday. But, the way you look at it is that this track is unique. Because if you remember a couple years ago, remember the Eric Almirola incident when he cut down a tire and literally landed on Danica Patrick's hood, and he had his, I believe it was only herniated disc, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, what happened in that wreck, it was Logano that cut down the tire.
It was Logano, yeah, I'm sorry.
Almirola had nowhere to go. He was trying to run the high line, and he ran right into them, and that's when he had the herniated disc in his back and missed a few races.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, a very scary incident, but things happen like that because tires here in Kansas, they wear, and it's bad. And, you have to drive your race car loose off the edge. And I really think, I mean, I know they already repaved the track, Eddie, but you have to change the dynamic somewhere. It has to be a multi-groove track. Otherwise, these owners and these cars are going to continue to wreck hard simply because they're high speed all the time. It's not like you're slowing down. They're like 160, 170 through the corners. They're right back up, 190s, and then slowing back down. It's a constant high rate of speed, and they're wall riding throughout most of it, which is a big reason why these tires are getting cut down, and also why, too, if someone breaks loose off the exit, well, your nose is directly going into that inside wall, and you're going to crash hard, almost like when you're at a plate track.
Yeah, I mean, and there's just so many wrecks, and, we talk about change, but I'm also hesitant as well because, you think about how they changed Texas Motor Speedway, and in my opinion, they completely botched that track with changing that up because, don't get me wrong, the racing is good at Kansas, but just the amount of wrecks we're seeing. And it's not just in the Cup Series. It's also in trucks and ARCA and Xfinity, which leads me into my second debate topic, which I don't know if I might have a different opinion on you on this. But the truck races have been a mess since they came back from Corona. I mean, Kansas, they had a 12-car crash. That Pocono race, they couldn't get through turn 1 multiple times. I mean, I know they don't want to have practice or qualifying, and it's working in Cup. It's creating better racing there, and I think in Xfinity too. But in trucks, it's just producing wreck fest at this point. I mean, you've got so many guys. You got Tanner Gray, who was doing drag racing until this year, and now is trying to run in the trucks without practice at these tracks, never turning a lap actually in the truck. I think they need to institute at least like a 30 to 60-minute practice for the trucks before their race. I mean, I don't really see why you're not doing it at this point, especially on race day when the guys are there. You can hop in the truck for an hour, get some laps in. There's no fans anyway. It doesn't really make a difference. So I don't really see why they're not doing it. I understand with Cup and Xfinity, I think the racing's better. But for these inexperienced guys in trucks, and I'd say in ARCA as well, because we've had a lot of messes in the ARCA races in their bigger tracks like Kansas and Kentucky, I think those two series should get at least a short practice session before they go racing.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, the way you look at it right now, and by the way, it's funny, you mentioned about the Cup race not really getting advertised, like how we forgot it was even on a Thursday in Kansas. I had no idea the trucks were even racing. Congratulations to Matt Crafton, by the way. Finally ended the streak of, this year, if he does win the championship, it's not another asterisk mark. But overall, it's been a mess. It really has been a mess. And it's funny. Remember a few years back when they added the caution clock because they felt like the truck races weren't enough of a mess, so they tried to create a mess? Well, now it's like they couldn't even get to the caution clock if they wanted to try to. So overall, I mean, they need to institute practice. The trucks, too, the handling, don't get me wrong, trucks are easier to drive handling-wise than the Cup cars and the Xfinity cars are. But you have to remember that it's so easy to lose the control and the handling of the truck if you don't have this set up right, straight onto the track. These teams need a couple of times to prepare because it's not like regular NASCAR. And the way you look at it, it creates issues, as we saw. Guys breaking too loose in turn 1, creating massive wrecks. Guys getting too tight. It's a hit or a miss. Don't get me wrong. I guess the wrecks bring excitement. But when you are racing to have 5 cars left on the track every week, it's not fun. It's definitely not fun, especially when you see good guys getting wiped out every week. I think they need to institute that practice, though, Eddie, 100%.
Speaking of instituting things, we're going to get into debate topic 3 of 6, first of 2 in the NBA. And you mentioned it earlier. Lou Williams now will miss the first 2 games for the Clippers because he snuck out to a gentleman's club when he's supposed to be in the bubble. Why is he doing this? This is not good for the NBA. It's not just for him. He's putting the rest of the team. He's putting the whole thing in danger. And I mean, the NBA's got to keep control of these guys because this is not the first situation. Think about the thing with Rashawn Holmes a couple weeks ago when Kelly Oubre started the rumor, oh, you can leave to get food and then you can come back. That's not the whole thing. The whole thing was about them providing meals for you. And you're at Disney World. You're at a place where they have so much food. I mean, you're at these like luxury hotels. You know what? If you want to do something like that and be leaving to go to a gentleman's club, you should not be in the bubble trying to compete for an NBA championship.
No, you should be back home, just taking the year off. But I do have to ask you this because the initial story I read, I thought Lou Williams left the bubble for a personal reason, and he did it while he was gone. Or was it just he left the bubble to go get food? Was it that scenario? Are you sure? Because that's one thing I have to ask because I wasn't quite sure when I was reading. They made it sound like he wasn't in the bubble when he did this. He was away.
Wait, who? Lou Williams?
Well, what I'm saying, they said it made it, the story, the way it made it sound like is that it wasn't just like, for example, what you mentioned, where he just left and said he was going to get food and went to a gentleman's club. It sounded like he left initially for a personal reason for a day or two, and he did it while he was gone.
I don't know, because from what Shams Charania reported and when I saw on Bleacher Report, they called it him, quote-unquote, sneaking out. I know Patrick Beverley, who's also on the Clippers, left for a family matter, so that might have something to do with it. So those are both players in the Clippers that have left. I don't think Lou Williams' one was, an honest one. I think Patrick Beverley, like Zion, they probably had a family member who was ill, something they had to attend to. But you know what? I mean, nonetheless, you should not be leaving unless it's an emergency. I mean, that was really bad judgment. And he's paying for it now. And on the Clippers, they're going to be without their sixth man against the Lakers on Friday.
2 games is generous. I think he needs more of a suspension, but that's just my opinion. I would even say you hold him without pay, and then you turn around and have him sit for 10 games.
Yeah, but they're not suspending him. This is just the quarantine, quote unquote, which, by the way, the arbitrary quarantines, I don't understand. He gets 10, Rashawn Holmes gets 14 for the food thing, and then Zion gets 4 when he comes back. I don't understand. It's 2 weeks. I mean, you got to be strict from one player to another. There's been 3 situations. 3 different guys got 3 different lengths of quarantine.
Yeah, but you know what? At the end of the day, I guess no one's catching COVID. But you know what I wonder it could be too, Eddie? The reason why the numbers are so different is I think it varies on state. And that's the other thing too. For example, Zion, let's say if he came here to New York, the New York policy makes you stay 14 days. But for example, if I went down to Bristol, Tennessee, they don't even have boundaries in regards to, because they're wide open right now, but they would have a different policy. If I went, even farther down, if I went to Virginia, if I'm not mistaken, Virginia is 10 days. So really, I think all depends where you go to. And that may be the reason why we're seeing so many different days of how many they have to sit in the bubble for before they're cleared.
Well, nonetheless, Clippers without Lou Williams and potentially without Patrick Beverley, too, for that Thursday showdown with the Lakers as they kick off the season. We'll be doing a preview on Thursday of the NBA. But 3 more debate topics. We'll come back to the NBA in a moment. I want to get into the 2 name changes here. Well, one new team with a weird name, and then Washington didn't really have time to make up a name. They got to get to training camp. So they're going to be the Washington football team. And then the Seattle Kraken, which we'll get to in a second, which is the most – oh, my God. Okay, but Washington I'm going to start with first because I understand you needed to get out on the field. And, with everything going on, and they've been a team for almost 100 years under the name the Redskins. So this is not a one-day solution. They got to think about it if they want any sort of, reference to Native Americans and how can they do it properly. And they got to think of something that kind of fits with the color scheme because they want to stick with the color scheme. But right now they're the Washington football team. And I want to ask you, because I feel like this is something that could kind of stick. I'm not saying they're going to be the Washington football team. But think about the things that American sports have adopted from Europe in the last, 10, 15 years. The projected ads on the field that we used to just see in, soccer, now we're seeing in American sports. Logos on the uniforms we're now seeing. That was first in Europe. You'd see every single soccer team was sponsored by BNP Paribas. And now, every NBA team's got their own sponsor that's on the uniform. Do you think, I know we see it in MLS, but could we see at some point in the 4 major sports with now the consideration that some of these team nicknames are problematic, that we might just see teams like the Washington football team?
I first off, I do like that they went with the Washington football team because when we last talked about this discussion, Eddie, I felt that they didn't have enough time to really appropriately come up with a name because they had to do it quickly. But at the same time, I mean, yes, I feel like this could be the beginning of a change, but I also feel like this was a bailout by Washington. And just hear me out on this because to me, it seemed like, all right, it's just simple. Let's make it the Washington football team. And did you even look at their helmet logo? You would think just put a big W on it. Their helmet logo
Isn't it just the number?
Yeah, it is disgusting. It is terrible to look at. But you would think simplistics, but to me, it was almost like they all got together and said, all right, well, this will get us out of heat. We'll say, hey, it's not going to be permanent, just temporary. If everyone likes it, we'll keep it. But if not, then okay, we'll turn around and we'll come up with something else. To me, this just seems like a bailout, just so that if fans didn't like it, they had a reason to then turn around and change it and give themselves more time.
Yeah, and now let's talk about the other name. The Seattle Kraken will be the 32nd NHL team. You know what? I like seeing a winter sport back in Seattle. That's a big winter city. They support the Seahawks and the Mariners well, but the Kraken, really? That's the best you could come up with?
Is their goal, do you think their goal chant is literally going to be the release the Kraken thing from Pirates of the Caribbean?
I don't know. And you know what? I'd understand that it's like a Nordic thing. I don't understand how that fits in with Seattle. But, also, I feel like everybody's all polarized and nervous with these nicknames right now between everything with the Redskins and the Indians and the Blackhawks. I mean, they wanted to go as far away from anything that could be offensive as possible. Let's just come up with some Nordic mythology reference and use that.
Well, you know what's funny too about it, and what I was mentioning in the group chat a little while ago is, you know who really missed out on this opportunity? Gary Sanchez, because his nickname is the Kraken, just as much as he is the Sanchino. And the way I look at it is that if he trademarked that, he would have made millions of dollars off of Seattle begging for that name. And to be utterly honest, maybe Seattle wouldn't have even thought of that name had he trademarked the term the Kraken. But unfortunately, Seattle is the Seattle Kraken. I'm going to be honest, I can't root for this team because I just can't back it. I really think the uniforms, in my opinion, look interesting, but gosh, I don't want to see that ice. I really just don't want to see that ice because it's just, I don't know how to put it. I'm not a big fan, for example, of the Winnipeg Jets logo in particular. When I hear Jets, I think New York Jets and a big disappointment compared to the Winnipeg Jets, which are just as much of a disappointment, it seems. But that's the team you think of. When you think about the Kraken, I just think of a disaster waiting to happen, to be honest. I really don't know. Seattle, don't get me wrong, big that you have a hockey team. But let's be honest, I mean, who plays hockey in Seattle? I don't know a single person that's going to Seattle to play hockey prior to this. This is, yes, a great time to expand, but I don't know what to expect. I feel like this is a disappointment waiting to happen for Seattle fans.
I just want to see a basketball team. I want to see the Sonics back in Seattle at some point, but unleash the Kraken. Let's see what happens. Two more quick debate topics on the world of basketball. First thing, the Spurs. Greg Popovich is there, but he's been sitting on the end, not really coaching during the scrimmage games. Becky Hammon coached the first scrimmage game. Tim Duncan's coaching the other. I feel like they're trying to breed both of them as the potential replacement for Pop. Tim, who's the best one?
Oh, that's a good debate because I really think, and I just don't know. I would have to say it's Tim Duncan. I'm sorry, Tim has played under Popovich's system now for years, and he knows more than anyone how Popovich works. And I think if there's anyone that can execute like Popovich, it's him. Tim Duncan is a very smart player, and not to discredit, of course, his opposition, but overall, when you look at it, I mean, you really want a guy like Tim Duncan that knows, game situations, understands it. Not to say that, that she doesn't understand it, but Tim Duncan playing in games on a regular basis, he understands big situations. He's won NBA championships, and he's won them under Greg Poppovich. And I'm not going to say they're the future of Greg Poppovich. Listen, Poppovich is going to be here for a very long time, but they get, first off, they're getting the opportunities they need to prove that they can be head coaches, which I think is huge. But I really think Tim Duncan will be the better off the head coach, and that's just simply because of how smart of a guy he is.
Well, this is the first debate topic where we disagree because I think Becky Hammon would actually work out a little better. Reason being, this isn't baseball. In baseball, we typically see players that they retire and they become head coaches. The NBA, you don't really see that as often. Some of these guys never played. Some of them, it's long after they retire that they end up getting into coaching. And the ones who come right into coaching, I'll think of one example, one Jason Kidd, and his time with the Nets and with the Bucks, not very good, including going to take a call during a summer league game in the middle of the game, or the whole infamous incident where he had JaVale McGee walk into him so he could spill a drink on the floor and get a timeout. I'm not saying Tim Duncan would do that because I think Tim Duncan, I think he'd hold himself to a higher standard. He's not a very outspoken guy. And we know about Pop's personality. Pop is a very outspoken person. He was literally going after the NFL after the whole national anthem thing. I mean, he's the type of guy who's going to be outspoken and help to lead a team. And I think Becky Hammon, now she's been with him for 4 or 5 years. She got the opportunity. I mean, they're both getting the chance to coach a game. But, I mean, she's been his right-hand man over these years that even with lower rosters, the Spurs are still really good. And they're still competitive. They're in the bubble right now, and they're going to be competing for that 8th seed. But I think she's the better coaching option right here. But we'll see what happens. They're both getting the opportunity. And one last thing before we wrap up. Actually, I see you wanted to say something.
Well, no, I was just going to say, if Becky Hammon gets an opportunity, what team – because I don't see it again. I don't see Poppovich retiring in a while. And I'm not saying, again, I think they're both, first off, going to be great coaches in my opinion. But if she's to get an opportunity, where do you think she would get her opportunity at?
That's a tough thought because, I mean, I can't see her going to like a big market squad maybe. She's not going to New York to coach the Knicks or the Nets. That definitely wouldn't happen. And, I mean, the reason why she's got such a tie with San Antonio is because she played with the San Antonio Stars in the WNBA for many years. Only other team she played for in the WNBA was the Liberty. And like I said, she's not going to the Knicks, she's not going to the Nets. So I could see a team maybe like Phoenix maybe at some point. I mean, they're not a huge market. They always have a lot of flux with their coach. So maybe a team like Phoenix, maybe a Sacramento. I think those, if it didn't work out, I think she's going to be a coach in the NBA at some point, no doubt. I mean, if any woman's going to coach an NBA game, she's the one. She's a very solid coach. She's the top assistant right now with Poppovich and that excellent coaching staff. He's bred so many great assistants to become head coaches in the past. Think about some of these guys. Think about Budenholzer, who had been with him when they were playing the Heat every year in the finals. And then he goes, takes an Atlanta team, gets their whole starting lineup in the All-Star game, the number 1 seed. Then he goes to Milwaukee, and now they're the best record in the NBA. So, I mean, Poppovich has the history of doing that, so we'll see what happens. Last thing, and this is kind of a fun one. I don't know if you saw any of the Lakers-Mavericks scrimmage, but LeBron James now looks like Denzel Washington or Morgan Freeman because he's got this gray beard that's coming in. I mean, I think it's just amazing because then I saw on NBA TV a game from 2004 with him and how different he looks, but how effective he is still and how his game has just never changed. I mean, how scary is that for an opposing player? I mean, everybody talks about, masked Kobe Bryant, masked Dwayne Wade, masked Steph Curry when they're on the court. How about gray beard LeBron James when you're 22 years old and you've got a man coming in with gray and white hairs on his beard coming in for the big dunk? I mean, that look is going to be awesome if he can win a championship.
I mean, think about this. We went from debating about LeBron's receding hairline to now essentially a gray beard. Yes, LeBron James does age, ladies and gentlemen. No one plays forever. But yes, it's going to be scary. And listen, I hope he keeps that thing for the year. Just like, you remember the game he went absolutely off when he had to wear the face mask?
Oh, yeah. Also, I just want to say, I feel like it's a tradition that when a guy has a face mask on, they do even better. LeBron, Kobe, Joel Embiid, the 3 guys that when they had their nose or face injury, they just absolutely destroy the competition in their mask.
Even another one, Amari Stoudemire, the first time he had to wear it before he had to permanently wear it, he went off as well in his first game. It's just a tendency of what tends to happen. But I remember, too, and if I'm not mistaken, LeBron got a lot of flack because he wore a black face mask while a lot of people wore the clear ones, which is why he got a lot of flack for that, because I guess it's like they couldn't see his face, especially on the broadcast.
Yeah.
But overall, I really think this could be the new thing for LeBron that we're seeing out of the norm, especially, showing what he did during his inner quarantine, saying, hey, I grew a beard now. Let's go out and let's play with it. It's a scary thing, especially, I guess you could say, because it's white-haired LeBron, something we're not used to seeing. But it's showing, hey, I'm old. I don't care. I'm proud of my appearance. I'm proud of being the best player to ever step in the court of NBA. That could be a whole nother argument for later. But I'm going to come out and I'm going to lead this Lakers team to a championship, which, by the way, I still think will win the NBA championship this year.
Well, he's still LeBron on the court, and he's Professor Dumbledore now in the beard game. But I mean, it's gonna be fun to watch LeBron James out there with the beard. And one more thing I just want to mention about LeBron that I just thought of that I remember. Remember the first time when they started bringing like the sleeve jerseys, and he was playing against the Knicks at the Garden, and he got so annoyed by the sleeves, he just like stretched them out and he just pulled it up like a tank top. Like, I mean, he always gets so much flack from everybody about all the different things that he does or how he appears and stuff. But guess what? It's just people trying to get at him because he's the best player in the NBA, and there's really nothing about it. I still think Michael Jordan's a better player historically, but that could be a debate for another day. That's going to wrap things up, and Thursday is going to be fun. We're going to have a guest on. We'll be announcing it on our Twitter at SportsSpeak Live to help us preview the NBA season, which begins on Thursday. We'll be doing that show on Thursday. It'll probably be airing while the Pelicans-Jazz game goes on, just before the Lakers-Clippers matchup at 9 o'clock on Thursday night. Until then, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
And this is SportsSpeak. Have a great night, everyone.